Hello, welcome to a new video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about some Kindle Unlimited books that I would like to recommend. I also want to talk about my Kindle Unlimited TBR. I tried to go through as much of the books on Kindle Unlimited as I could to compile this list, and I feel like I have a pretty good amount of recommendations, and of course I always have a big TBR. Even if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, these are just books in general that I would recommend and books that I want to read. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, they're on there, but if you don't, you might still have the book, so you might still want to watch this video. So I'm going to start out with my recommendations. So these are books that I've read. Some of them I did read on Kindle Unlimited. Some of them I did not, but they are on there, so I wanted to add them to this list. The first one is The English Masterpiece. If you saw my last vlog, then you saw that I absolutely loved this book. This is an historical fiction book that takes place in the 70s in London. It has a big focus on art. Lily works at an art gallery. At the beginning of the book, Picasso has just passed away. Her boss wants to make an exhibit to highlight some of Picasso's works. At this exhibit, Lily notices that one of the art pieces is a forgery, and she says it out loud, and then basically we're following everything that happens after that. Her saying that with other people hearing it leads to a lot of difficult circumstances for people. I absolutely loved this. There was just a tiny little bit of a mystery at different points about like the whole forgery part of it. I loved learning about Lily, and we learned about her boss a lot too. There were different perspectives that we were reading. I just honestly loved every single thing about this book. So if you haven't read it, even if you're not super interested in art, I would still recommend it because I'm not a big art person, but I enjoyed this book so much. The next book that I have to recommend is The Matchmaker's Gift, and this is also in my last vlog. I didn't realize it was on Kindle Unlimited. This is also an historical fiction book, but it has some magical realism in it. There are also two different timelines going on, so we're following Sarah in one of the timelines when she was younger, and that is in the early 1900s, and we kind of follow her throughout her life. She has the gift of matchmaking. This is where the magical realism comes in, because this isn't just like she is good at putting people together. It is she just knows when two people are supposed to be together. We're kind of seeing her as she discovers that, and then throughout her life matching people together. And then the other timeline takes place in the 90s. We're following her granddaughter, who is actually a divorce lawyer, which is kind of the opposite of matchmaking. In her timeline, her grandmother, Sarah, has just passed away. So she's learning about what her grandmother did with matchmaking, how that might involve her now. I really loved this book. I loved the magical realism part of it. I really loved the early 1900s time period that we read about in it. And Sarah is Jewish, so there's a big part of this book that kind of highlights the Jewish culture, which I thought was really interesting too. And this book was different than any other kind of historical fiction book that I've read before, so I also loved that about it too. Another historical fiction book that also has magical realism in it is When the Day Comes. This is the first book in the Timeless series. I haven't read any of the others yet, but I cannot wait to. In this book, we're following Libby. She lives in two timelines. One of them is in 1774 in Williamsburg during the American Revolution, and then the other timeline, she lives in New York City and in London. I'm pretty sure they were called time hoppers. She lives one day in one timeline, and then when she goes to sleep and wakes up, it's the same day in the other timeline. So she's living in both of those every other day. If you are a time hopper, when you turn 21, you have to decide which time period you want to live in, and then that's the one that you have the rest of your life, which, as you can imagine, is a super hard decision because she has a different family in both timelines. Different things are happening. I cannot imagine having to choose that. So of course, there was a lot of things that happened that affected what timeline she was going to choose. You were kind of kept guessing which one it was going to be throughout the whole book. This book was so good. It's also a Christian fiction book, so that is kind of sprinkled in throughout the book because Libby and her mom in the 1774 timeline are Christians. There's a big topic of like, I guess, trusting God's plan instead of you trying to be in control. So I really liked that part of it too. The next book I have was my favorite book that I read last year, and that is Drinker of Ink. This book takes place in the 90s in California, and we're following Vivian, who is from New York, but her family is from Paris, and she is now living in California because she's at college, and she is very homesick. She's really connected to her family, and she's kind of a loner or an introvert, so she's having a hard time. She loves to write, and she loves poetry, and she has a poetry class, and her professor in that class, which he is also and a student, so they're close to the same age. She starts to have a crush on him, and then we're kind of following them throughout the book. This book is written like you're reading Vivian's diary, and I really, really loved that. I loved her writing. This book just made my heart grow. This might be my favorite love story that I've ever read. It was just absolutely perfect. There were different moments where I felt like my heart was gonna burst. It was just so good, and like I said, the writing is amazing. I highlighted something almost on every single page. And again, this was my favorite book last year, so this book I highly recommend if you have not read it yet. This should be at the top of your list. I also really love the Emma M. Lyon series that is on Kindle Unlimited. I've either read 4 or 5 of them. I'm pretty sure there's 8, maybe about to be 9. They're very tiny, like 100 pages, and these are just Emma's journals, so it is a super fast read. Like every single journal entry might be 1 to 2 pages, and we're just following Emma and her life in, I think it's the 1800s in London, maybe, I can't remember, somewhere around there. And it's kind of just her, like I said, her day-to-day life. I fell in love with Emma. I love her and her personality, and then just getting to keep up with what is going on in her life is so fun. I feel like this one could sound kind of boring, but it's really not. As you're reading each book, you just get more and more connected to the characters. So this is a really good, cozy, quick read if you want something like that. A book that I read recently that I absolutely loved was A Tartan Love. This is a historical romance book. I'm pretty sure it was in the 1800s, but it takes place in the Scottish Highlands, which I love reading about Scotland, so that was a plus for me while reading this. But we're following Tavish and Isla and their families. It's kind of like Romeo and Juliet. Like, they hate each other. They've been enemies for like hundreds of years. At the beginning of the book, we're kind of seeing Tavish and Isla when they're teenagers meeting and forming a friendship, and then we're seeing in present day for them as they're adults now and what their relationship is. That's all I'm gonna say about that, because I don't want to give too much away, and I don't even really want to say like what trope would be in this book, because I feel like that would spoil it a little bit. It was such a sweet love story, and I just absolutely love Tavish because you just get to see his love for Isla. He was just such a good male main character. I loved just getting to see their love story play out, and this book really made me want to try some more books by Nichole Van, because I'm pretty sure she has a lot of books on Kindle Unlimited. So if you've read any others by her that you really liked, let me know. The next book I have is The Printed Letter Bookshop by Katherine Reay. It has been many years since I read this book, but I still think about how much I loved it, and honestly I probably need to reread it. But we're following Adalyn, and she's just inherited her aunt's bookstore. I'm pretty sure it's struggling to stay open, and she's trying to decide what to do with it, but she kind of gets connected to the other women who work there, what's going on in their lives, and then there might be a little bit of a love story in this too. But this one is just super cozy, and if you like books set in bookstores, then this one would be perfect to try. The next book I have is a Katherine Center book, and this is The Bodyguard. I really love Katherine Center's books. They always have romance in them, but they're a little bit more women's fiction too. At least some of them are. This one not so much. I think it has a little bit more romance in it than some of the books that I've read by her. But in this one, we're following Hannah, who is a bodyguard, and she ends up being a bodyguard for Jack Stapleton, who is famous. They have to pretend to be dating because he's going back home to be with his mom because she's sick, and he doesn't really want his family to know that he needs a bodyguard and to worry them. They have to pretend that they're dating, and I usually really love the fake dating trope. I feel like this one was done really well, and it was also really fun to see like the bodyguard was the woman. My next recommendation is Finlay Donovan is Killing It. In this book, we're following Finlay, who is a mom, and she's recently divorced, and she's also a writer. One day when she's out to lunch with her agent and they're talking about her next book, which she writes thrillers, someone overhears and thinks that she is basically like a hitman. They want Finlay to murder their husband for them. Of course, Finlay does not want to do that because that is not her job, but she ends up somehow getting roped into this. A lot of crazy things happen. It's a very funny book, and I have heard some people don't enjoy it because you kind of have to suspend your disbelief about what would actually be happening, but that didn't bother me at all. I thought it was very funny. This is also a series, which I've read 2 of the books, but I need to read the rest of them because they're just so funny. The next book I have to recommend is Belladonna. I read this book last year, and this is honestly the perfect time to read it because it is a great cozy fall book. This is a fantasy, and we're following Signa, who basically cannot die. She's figured this out because she's had many situations where she should have, and she didn't. She has been passed around to different families after her parents have passed away. None of them are very nice to her and none of them really want her, and each of them that she gets passed around to ends up dying. The family that she is going to stay with now, while she's there, she figures out that the mom of the family might have been murdered, so she's trying to figure out what happened to her. Also, Signa can see ghosts and talk to them because she is talking to the mother of this family she's staying with. And then Death is also a character in this who Signa talks to. I feel like sounds like a lot is going on in this book, but it was so good. Like I said, perfect for this time of year. I'm gonna read the next one very, very soon, and I've heard they just keep getting better. The next book I have is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. This is in her adult series. Divine Rivals is YA, so it reads very different, and if you're not expecting that, then I feel like if you're going from Divine Rivals to reading A River Enchanted, then you're going to be disappointed because it's a lot more detailed and just it feels like a different author wrote both of the books, honestly, but I really loved both of them. In A River Enchanted, it is a fantasy book, and in this world we're following Jack, who is summoned to come back home after lots of young girls are going missing. This feels kind of historical, honestly, like maybe kind of Scottish because they have different clans, but Jack has come back and he is going to try to figure out what is happening to these girls. There's also magic involved in this. There's spirits or fae or something like that are kind of in nature, and then there's just a little bit of a love story in this. The writing, of course, is beautiful. It feels like a slow fantasy book, honestly, not in a bad way, more so in a way of like you just want to cozy up with it on a snowy day where you have no other plans. I still need to read the second book, which I need to do so soon. I'm probably going to do that this winter because I read A River Enchanted last winter, and there's only 2 books in the series, so that kind of makes me happy because it doesn't feel overwhelming. The next book I have is The Kiss of Deception. I read this book this summer. It is another fantasy book, and I think there's 2 or 3 books in this series. We're following Leah, who is a princess, and at the very, very beginning of the book, she's getting ready for her wedding that she does not want to happen, so she decides to run away. We're kind of just following the chaos from her doing that. 2 people end up going after her. One of them is an assassin, and one of them is the prince that she was supposed to marry. I really loved this one because I love how it felt kind of, not exactly like a fairy tale, but I still love reading about princes and princesses in that time period in fantasy books. This one, I really loved the love story in it, and I'm curious where it's gonna go because again, I need to read the second and third one. It does have kind of a little bit of a love triangle because, like I said, these 2 guys are going after Leah. They might end up having some feelings for her. And then the last book I have to recommend is Divine Rivals, which I already talked about, A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross, but I also love Divine Rivals. This series is so beautifully written. If you haven't read it before, we're following Iris, who lives in the mortal realm. There are different realms in this world where the gods are. Like I said, Iris is in the mortal realm, but there is a war between gods going on. Her brother is off in this war, and she's kind of trying to take care of herself and her mom. She works at a newspaper, so she's a writer, and she has a rival there who is Roman, and they're kind of competing at this newspaper. They end up writing letters together. Letters get sent to them magically, but they don't know that they're writing to each other. The letters are so beautiful. I love, like I said, Rebecca Ross's writing. The story was just so interesting. One of my favorite fantasy books ever. Now I'm gonna move on to my Kindle Unlimited TBR. So these are the books that I really want to get to soon that I saw on Kindle Unlimited. The first one is A War of Crowns. This book I had never heard about before, but I was watching one of Kay's videos from Kay's library. She read this book and vlogged it, and it sounded so good. It's a fantasy book, and it's following Seraphina, who becomes the queen. And I think there's a war going on, there's a lot of politics, and it might be like a romantasy book, but I think Seraphina is trying to end this war, and then apparently there's a love story, like I said. That's honestly all I remember about it, but I'm really excited to try it because I love finding new fantasy books. This one sounds like it could be really, really good. The next book I have is Foxglove, which is the second book in the Belladonna series. I honestly don't know what this one is about. I know we're still following Signa. I think we're following her cousin in this one too, and maybe fate along with death. I really don't want to know too much because I've heard the second one might be the best one, and I just want to go into it with no expectations of what it's going to be about. This one I'm probably going to read very soon, like within the next week or 2. I'm so excited about it. The next book I want to read is The Prison Healer. I've heard so many people have read this book, so it's been on my list for a while. What I know about it is we're following Kiva, who is a healer in a prison, but I'm pretty sure she's also in prison. And then I think there are some trials that go on that she gets gets involved in. And that's honestly really all I know. I know this is also a series, so I'm wanting to try the first book and see if I want to actually read the series. This book, like I said, I don't know a lot about. And if you've read it, let me know if you liked it, because I feel like I've heard some people really love it and then some people think it's just okay. The next book I want to read is also a fantasy book that I feel like everybody has read, and that's Powerless. I hear everybody talk about this book and how good it is, but I've never read it before. I feel like I just need to at least try it to see if I would like it. In this one, I know that everybody has some kind of power that's gifted to them. Peyton actually does not, so she has to pretend that she does, because if you don't have a power, I'm pretty sure you're sentenced to death. She has to pretend that she has a power, and then she ends up getting caught up in some kind of trials that they have going on. And then of course there's a love story in this one too. This next book I talked about in my last TBR video, I think, and that is A Study in Drowning. I would love to get to this book this fall, because it just seems like that is the time that you need to read it, either fall or winter maybe. It's a fantasy book. Don't really know anything about it. I think it's kind of dark academia-ish. I think it also might have fae in it, so that's honestly all I know, but I hear so many people talk about it. The next book I want to read is A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic. This sounds like the coziest fantasy book, and I just heard about it this year recently. I think the main character's name is Arletta. She's a human, but she gets entered into this baking competition with all these other magical creatures. I know there's orcs, dwarfs, elves. She gets entered into this competition, and she's the only human. From what I've heard, it's very cozy. There is a love story in it, and then there's baking. So honestly, I need to read this right now because it sounds super cozy and like the perfect time to read it. The next book I want to read is Dreams Lie Beneath. This is also by Rebecca Ross. I didn't even realize this is the third book that I have in this video that's hers. This book I'm curious about, but undecided if I'm gonna read it or not. I need somebody to tell me if it's too dark or too eerie, I guess, because in this one we're following Clementine, who in this fantasy world, during each new moon, nightmares come to life, which that sounds kind of like the scary part to me. There are different wardens that are keeping these nightmares like away from the people, and Clementine is going to be one of these wardens. I think there's a love story in this as well. If you've read this, let me know how it was and if you think it's going to be too dark for me, because I kind of want to read all of Rebecca Ross's books, but I don't want to put myself through something if it's going to be too much for me. The next book that I want to read is In This Moment, and this is the second book in the Timeless series that I talked about earlier. The only thing I know about this one is in this one there are actually 3 timelines that the main girl lives in. Those timelines are 1861, 1941, and then 2001. I just love in these books how you're reading about different time periods, because again, I love historical fiction. These are the perfect mix of historical fiction and magical realism. So I'm really excited to start this one soon. The next book that I have is a historical fiction book called The London House, and this is by Katherine Reay. So I really want to get to it soon because I love the masterpiece so much. In this book, we're following Caroline, who finds out that her great aunt might have been a traitor during World War II and then married a German Nazi. I think Caroline's trying to figure out if that's true, what actually happened. It says that part of the book is epistolary, and then it also is like 2 timelines. So I'm guessing we're going to go back and forth between the present day with Caroline and then during World War II with her great aunt. And I think there's also something to do with spies in this. So this sounds really good because it's historical fiction. It sounds like it has a little bit of a mystery of trying to figure out what actually happened with her great aunt, and I feel like that's a really good combination of things that I love in books. The next book that I want to read is What the Silent Say. This is actually based on a true story. I think it was the author's grandfather is who it's based on. It takes place during World War II. I think we're following 2 brothers, and that's mainly all I know about it, but I did hear it's really good. I think it just came out this year, and on Goodreads it says if you love Kristen Hannah, or if you really loved Band of Brothers, which I have watched that documentary series and it's so good, then you would really love this book. So I want to try it soon. So when I'm ready for a World War II book that is based on a true story, then I'm going to try this one. The next book I want to read is Enola Holmes, and this is actually a series of books. I think the first one is on there. I don't know if all of them are though. I've watched the Netflix movies and absolutely loved them. I love the time period. Again, I love mysteries too. I really want to try the book because I want to compare it to the movies. If you don't know who Enola Holmes is, she's supposed to be Sherlock Holmes's little sister, and she's also solving mysteries. I think it's a YA series, but I think I'll really enjoy it because like I said, I love mysteries. love Sherlock Holmes, and I love this like Victorian time period. The next book I want to read is The Love Haters by Katherine. Like I said before, I really like her books, so I want to try this one because this is her newest one. I think it's an enemies to lovers. The main girl is profiling a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. This is what I'm reading about this right now, but she's doing that for her job, and I think she pretends that she can swim, but I think this is a romance between the Coast Guard who she's profiling's brother and her, but they don't like each other. I don't know exactly for sure. I don't know a lot about it, clearly, but I want to try it because every Katherine Center book I've read, I've either given 4 or 5 stars to. I always really enjoy her books. The next book I want to read is Heidi Lucy Loses Her Mind. This is the second book in the Juniper Bean mystery series. I don't think you have to have read the first one to read this one because it's kind of just in the same town. I really loved Juniper Bean. I think I read it last year. It's like a funny romantic mystery. This is the second one, but this follows Heidi and she owns a bookstore, so that alone makes me want to read it. At the beginning of the book, she gets a head injury and she knows that there's something that she's supposed to be remembering, like a secret, but she doesn't know what it is, and then a woman gets killed in her bookstore, so they're trying to kind of unravel that mystery. She doesn't have her memory back, so trying to figure out what this secret is that she has, and then there's a love story in this. I think it's gonna be funny and cozy and cute. And then the last book that I have on my Kindle Unlimited TBR is A Tale of Two Castles. This is a middle grade book, and this is written by the same author who wrote Elle Enchanted. I love Elle Enchanted, the book and the movie. In this book, we're following Elodie, who travels to the town of Two Castles because she wants to be an actress. And while she's there, I think she gets roped into some kind of dangerous mission in an ogre's castle. I think there's dragons in this, ogres, and it just sounds like a lot of fun. And I haven't read a middle grade in a while, so when I do get to a middle grade, I'm probably going to pick up this one next. That is all of the books that I have on my recommendations list for Kindle Unlimited and my TBR. I hope that maybe you found a book on here that you want to read soon, maybe one that you haven't heard of before. If there are any on this list on my TBR that you have read that you loved, let me know so I know to put it closer to the top of my list on what to read next. And I would love to know if you have Kindle Unlimited and you have a book on there that you really loved that I haven't mentioned. Let me know what it is because I'm always on there trying to find more books to read. I would love to get recommendations from you all. But if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.